Janice, how you doing this morning? It's good to see you.
Terrific, Bob. Thank you. And you look great, even though your arms are a little long. I didn't notice that before.
Well, what an unusual way to begin the interview. That was funny. Early vote. People can actually start voting next Tuesday, October 9th, with in-person absentee voting at one location, at the county clerk's annex office at 6th and Lomas. We have early voting that begins countywide and statewide, obviously, at many locations on October 20th, and then Election Day is 5 weeks from tomorrow. In terms of the early voting, how has that impacted the campaign strategy at this point?
Well, I think it's impacted everybody's campaign strategy because you have an election season, not an election day. So how you apportion your resources dramatically affected my campaign. I have been up on television for more than 4 weeks because people will begin voting October 9th, and they need to know who I am. They are going to make their decision. And so as we get closer to Election Day, depending on how the money goes, it used to be we threw everything into the last 72 hours. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. And so you have to spread it out.
Yeah, and the get out the vote, the grassroots exactly. Aspect of the campaign as well, exactly. I would assume, has been greatly impacted. Give us a sense of where your campaign's at right now.
Wow. I'm so blessed to have so many different volunteers all across the area, Torrance County, all of Bernalillo, Sandoval County, a little bit in Santa Fe, and also in Valencia. And we believe that this is a very, very close race. All of our polling shows that this race is incredibly close. And I believe that we are developing the resources to carry this over the end. I'm very encouraged.
Now, the one public poll we've seen on the race was from the Albuquerque Journal a couple of weeks ago, and they had Michelle Lujan Grisham leading at that point done, and the campaign or the poll was done in early September. But the one number, at least in this survey, that really stood out was the huge block of still undecided voters.
Right.
20%, according to that poll. I mean, that obviously means that there's an opportunity here for one of the candidates to gain momentum and really make an impact on this race by getting those undecided voters.
Absolutely. Even as late as last week, and I believe the DCCC did a poll, and the race is narrowing. The undecideds are still up over 11. Just an amazing number. And I think that goes to the fact that my opponent and I are both, while we have been public servants for a lot of time, just not in the eye of the public at all. But we're focusing on that Senate race, and we're focusing on the presidential race.
Now, debates. You certainly have the formal debates that are coming up on some of the TV stations. I know Channel 13 was hoping to do a debate, but Michelle Lujan Grisham declined that opportunity. She also turned down an opportunity to have a debate or a forum, if you will, in front of the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, and you're very critical of her for that.
I was, and that's not the only one. And many people really want to hear what their representatives have to say. So the Shriners were another group that reached out early on and said, we would like to host an opportunity to hear how you're the same and how you're different. And she also turned that down.
Okay, but you've had a couple of appearances, co-appearances, if you will, debates or forums, what I like to call neighborhood debates, where you show up to a community center or something like that, a church, and have a debate in front of a few hundred people who just show up and ask questions from regular people. How have those been going?
Well, I would say they're still few and far between, but I think that we're starting to see a very clear difference between my opponent and me. I come from the private sector. I have a small business background. And while I served in the legislature, that was not my life. And when you listen to us talk about how we approach these solutions, those debates really show how starkly different we are in our approaches to solutions. And my opponent's solutions are very much government-centered, taxpayer-centered.
An example of that is a story on the front page of the Albuquerque Journal where there are stories written on the issue of health care and Obamacare from your perspective, and then also Michelle Lujan Grisham's perspective, too. What's the main difference there between you two?
Well, again, her solution is all with taxpayer dollars. It is very much an approach that they are going to take care of you, and all encompassing without any thought of individual responsibility or individual choice. And at the end of the day, New Mexicans are a pretty independent breed. I'm not sure that I really want the government helping me in my life to the extent that is on the front page of the paper. I want to make those choices myself. I want that choice.
All right, let's get to your phone calls now for Janice Arnold-Jones. Mike, you're first up this morning on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, Mike.
Good morning, Bob. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
In full disclosure, I'm a member of the National Rifle Association. I'm actually a life member of the National Rifle Association. And this morning they released their gradings and endorsements for the Senate and congressional race. And I wanted to be the first to congratulate Janice on being endorsed by the NRA, given an A grading. And by the way, they did endorse Heather Wilson, too.
Terrific. I was not aware of that. Mike, that's great news. And when it comes to the Second Amendment, and I always go back to this concept, please don't forget that the reason we have a Second Amendment is not as much for sportsmen as it is for citizens to defend themselves against their own government. And it's just a fundamental thought that I truly support.
All right, let's continue now. Dave, you're next on 770 KKOB with Janice Arnold-Jones. Go ahead, Dave.
Morning, Bob.
Hi.
Janice.
Hi, Dave.
So I understand that Michelle won't debate you with the chamber, but what do you know about the write-in Green candidate, and would you care to include that candidate in a debate at the chamber?
Dave, thank you for that question. I only know a little bit about her, and the fact that she is actually a qualified write-in candidate, my hat is off to her, because our ballot access in this state is extremely difficult. And I truly believe that citizens deserve the opportunity to talk with anybody who is willing to raise their hand. And so I would be very interested if they're willing to do that. I'm there, because I think she has a right to be heard, and I think there will be certainly contrast.
Mm-hmm. Now, specifically to the forum or the debate that was going to be sponsored by the chamber, even though Michelle has declined that opportunity, you still get to appear, though, right? Or
I'm going to ask Charlotte, but I think the answer is no. Do we? No, I would say I'm not sure that they're going to go forward, which is very sad to me.
All right. Let's go to Joe. You're next on 770 KKOB. Joe?
Yeah, Janice, I'd like to mention something that I've brought up before, and I've brought up with your opponent, and she's touting that she has done all these things for elder care, for nursing homes, for the elder, but there's an issue going on in the state of New Mexico, and I think all over the country, about how we're treating our older people with Alzheimer's and dementia, and basically once these people get Alzheimer's and dementia, all their rights are taken away, and they go to the legal system. And we tried to get your opponent to help us with this issue, because she's the one that wrote these laws for this elder care, and I wish you'd bring that up in a debate with her about guardianship and conservatorship and things like this, where the people basically in the legal system are depriving these people of their rights and their dignity, and the families. And it's a huge issue, and if all these people that have Alzheimer's, that's what's going to bankrupt our system. And I'd like to know if you would either address that, or if you'd bring that up.
All right.
Your opponent.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much. Janice, if you'll just wait 1 minute, we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and you can respond to that call. And then we'll take more of your phone calls and questions for Janice Arnold-Jones at 243-3330. Republican candidate for Congress, Janice Arnold-Jones, our in-studio guest this morning. Your calls at 243-3333. Toll free is 1-800-460-0770. And you can also send me an email question for Janice. My email address is bob@770kkob.com. Janice, before we get back to more phone calls, you wanted to respond to the caller we had right before the break regarding Alzheimer's and guardianship.
Right. That was Joe. And Joe, I hope you'll call my campaign office, 797-8030, because there's some details I need to get from you. And I only have kind of a glancing understanding of the way that our seniors are actually losing their rights. But I want to go back to my opponent and her advocacy for seniors. And when I was sitting in the legislature, one of the things that was truly troubling to me was this belief that money doesn't matter, and advocating for seniors. And so one of the things that I got to witness was the imposition of the nursing home bed tax. This was a tax that was imposed on our seniors who had done their job, planned to take care of themselves. They were now in nursing homes, and that tax was $8.82 a day. And I can remember sitting in the tax committee, listening to a couple of secretaries advocate for this, and watching my opponent say nothing. And it made me always wonder, is there really advocacy here for the seniors? And I'm not so sure.
All right, let's get back to your calls. Dave, you're next on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, Dave.
Good morning. I'm very interested in energy policy. And when I looked at your opponent's website, about the only thing I could find on that was support for renewable energy and increased taxes on oil companies. I'd like to know if you think that's an adequate policy. And what is your policy on energy and the environment? And, the environment, but especially energy and the economy.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, Dave, thanks.
Oh, great question. One of my favorite questions. So I really am an all of the above type of energy person. But here's where we are in our country today. When you have affordable, reliable, accessible energy, you have manufacturing, you have jobs. When you start driving up the cost of energy, then we have single moms who are having to make a choice between, do I put gas in my tank or do I buy bread for my kids? And so making sure that our energy costs are low, also that it's reliable, because I want heat in the wintertime, is really important. So the fact that we are, under the guise of renewables, driving up the cost of coal, oil, and gas, making it less available, absolutely makes no sense to me.
All right, 243-3333. David, you're next on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, David.
Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, David.
Good to see you. Hear you on the radio and all that. I got to tell you, my big thing is sequestration going on in Congress right now, where a very few group of people are making budget decisions for the entire country. One of the things that we can do to change that, send Heather to the Senate and send you up there as well. I am very, very, very concerned about a state like ours, which really depends greatly on defense, having in fact, no say at all in how money is spent, because a few people in the Senate have decided that they can go ahead and hold the entire country hostage. And now we're at this situation where not only did we have a fiscal cliff, but the Senate has helped build a real large ski jump at the end of that. And I want to know, what can you do? Because I'm planning to send you. So let's just go cut to the chase. What would you do while you're there to put an end to this absolute foolishness that these people came up with?
All right, David, thanks for your call. And Janice, we got to take a break for the news, and we'll come back and we'll answer. We'll let you talk about those looming defense cuts and the impact they could have on New Mexico. And then more of your phone calls as well for Janice Arnold-Jones, 243-3333. The news is next on 770 KKOB. Our final few moments on the show this morning with Republican candidate for Congress, Janice Arnold-Jones, 243-3333. Let's go to David. You're next on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, David.
Okay. Hi, Janice. My concern is, again, state lands being taken by the federal government. I've talked to you about this before, and I questioned Congressman Pierce about it last week, and we all agreed that this shouldn't be happening. Today, my question is more specific. Okay, what is the process by which these lands are taken? Is there some federal law that the federal government comes to the state legislatures and say, we're taking this land, and the state legislature says okay? Or do they come to the state legislature and say, we're taking this land and there's nothing you can do about it? And if there is such a law, it has to be unconstitutional, because Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says, is very specific about what purposes the Congress can take state lands for. So that's my question.
Thanks, David.
Okay, David, it's a little bit of a combination of both. But so here's a really good example. There was a bill in Congress to turn the Organ Mountains into a monument. That is a federal taking of lands. Congress has to pass that. We can fix that. But I think the bigger question is, of the amount of federal lands in the state of New Mexico, what is the process to take it back? And I am ready to start taking back some of those pieces, because when you have too much federal land, you have no economy. The people of New Mexico, we live here because we love it, but we deserve to have an economy, and we have to have a private sector where the private sector can actually generate income. And you're not going to do that.
What's our percentage right now of federal lands in New Mexico?
The federal lands is about 35%. There's 11% Native American lands, and I think 10% state lands. So it all comes up to about 55%. Really doesn't generate any taxes.
243-3333. Madeline, you're next on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, Madeline.
Yes, Janice, I have a business in the North Valley, very busy intersection, Alameda and Coors and Corrales. If you have an opportunity to hold a town hall somewhere in our area, and I would be more than happy to use my sign as a way to advertise your town hall.
Thanks, Madeline.
You're awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Any opportunity to talk to voters face to face, this is how we're going to fix it. You really don't fix the nation's problems in the headline of a newspaper. It's one-to-one.
Real quickly, if you're elected, are you going to hold town hall meetings as a sitting member of Congress? We don't see many of those anymore.
You know what? I have been hosting...
Steve Pierce does a lot of them, but not many of our other folks in Congress here.
I've been hosting a town hall meeting every Saturday for the last 4.5 years from 9 to noon, and it is the most insightful activity. I don't get to go all the time, but I actually make better legislation because you tell me where it's broken, right, and I get to fix it.
Janice, thanks for your time today. Tell everybody about your website.
Oh, my website is janice2012.us. Campaign number is 797-8030, so janice2012.us.
Thank you very much, Janice. Appreciate your time
Bob,
today.
Thank you.
Thanks. Those of you calling in and talking with our guest, Janice Arnold-Jones, remember to listen for your name right before we go to the Huckabee Report. We'll announce a winner. You'll get a breakfast for 4, 2X. 243-3333. And Janice, before we get to more phone calls, our caller right before the news break talking about sequestration and the looming defense cuts that could have a tremendous impact on New Mexico.
Oh, it absolutely will have a huge impact. So, and I'm not sure which way to attack this, but as a legislator, sequestration is just, I use the term chicken caca way to legislate. It is just stupid. It's like saying everything in the country has the same value, or you can simply look at things by a percentage, and that absolutely isn't true. And in the state of New Mexico, we provide a national security, national defense component that if our representatives fail to go to Washington and remind people exactly what we do, you put our country at risk. And this is not an issue of New Mexico has more than its fair share. It's because New Mexico has a very specific mission. I'm not in favor of waste, so if you think we're not going to take some cuts, we probably are. But when it comes to defending this nation, our members must stand up. But sequestration as a legislator, this is like saying, gee, budgeting is really hard, so let's let somebody else do it. And I am not that kind of a legislator. I will get in there and I will do the work. But I look at what has happened in our own defense contracting community because we now do not have a budget. We have, my guess is 10,000 people who have jobs in name only. They do not have paychecks. They are living on their IRAs and their 401ks. And the difference in our community is they're good Americans. They have their clearances. They know when they apply for unemployment, all of that goes away. The country will have to reinvest and reinvestigate. This is a huge hit for our community.
243-3333. Back to your calls. Paul, you're next on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, Paul.
Good morning, Janice. Good morning, Bob. Janice, I'm a big supporter of you, but I work in the evening, so I'm not able to go to your campaign headquarters there in Pennsylvania. But I do go to Victory, New Mexico. I just want to give a shout out to everyone
bless
out there.
You.
Well, thank you. And we're having a big call, Super Saturday, next Saturday. One way, if you're busy during the week, they're very great to work with. Come by for an hour, half an hour, a couple hours. Anything you could do is appreciated and does help our candidate, Janice Arnold-Jones.
Paul, thank you so much. You asked me earlier, Bob, what was going on in this campaign, and I think this is kind of a bellwether campaign. I have so many volunteers, and the touches are personal, one-to-one, and I don't think I've ever seen it at this level.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.
Let's go to Sarge. You're next on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, Sarge.
Good morning. I think you're missing the most important question everybody wants to know. I mean, what kind of superhero would you be? But the more serious one. I've asked the other candidates this. We've got soldiers that, they're going over there at young ages, and this applies for even the guys that are serving Vietnam, Korea, and World War II. When they go over there and they get hurt, they're not unable to perform work, and I mean unable. So once they come home, they're not going to be able to get a job, so communities can't really do a whole lot to give them a job because they can't sustain one. The government doesn't have anything in place to really help these guys. They're going to get their VA, bill, which, is going to give them maybe $2,900 a month. Social Security, they didn't pay into it, so they're not going to see a whole lot there. They're not looking at getting a whole lot of money. And when you look at, somebody that does Congress for 4 years, someone who serves in the Senate, president, or any other person that's had, a job just for a minimum amount of time, the benefits that they walk away with, the money they walk away with, and here we got a 24-year-old, veteran that went over there, got hurt because he was unable to do 20 years. The rest of his life is going to be budgeted, and he's not going to have a whole lot that he can do about it. At some point, I think that we really need to look at, even with the guys in Vietnam that were wounded in combat, being able to give them an extra stipend, something to help these guys so that if they don't have anything else, that they don't have to live their life, on a bare minimum, or, end up on a street, or, look at other issues that, is even worse. I mean, we need to help these guys.
All right. Thanks, Sarge.
Sarge, you make such a great point. And, Bob, as you probably know, my dad was killed on active duty. I am the wife of a retired Navy commander. And the promises that we make to our veterans are very, very important to me. And Sarge makes a good point. Can you imagine being 24 years old and losing 3 of your limbs and living under the conditions that we have right now? So as a member of Congress, I am going to be tasked with doing 2 things that are near and dear to our veterans' hearts. One is making sure that we take care of our economy. The greatest threat to our economy is our debt. And yet, we made a promise to our veterans. They gave their bodies, they gave their lives, and I think it's really important to honor that. So in the middle of all of that, I will be working to make sure that our veterans get the care that they need, and the veterans who have come back with traumatic brain injury, especially so.
Okay, 243-3333. Dave, you're next on 770 KKOB with Janice Arnold-Jones. Go ahead, Dave.
Janice, I know this question might sound kind of odd, but what would you do for our country to put God and country ahead of party, since your opponent's party has rejected God when they had their convention? We seem to be wandering off farther and farther away from the word God. And I wish if you're elected to Congress, you'd make that an important project to get God back into our schools and into our Congress and into our politics, for that matter, where we've strayed so far away from it that we're reaping what we have sown. What would you do to put God and country ahead of party?
Thanks, Dave.
Well, I watched the Democratic convention, and when God was booed, I was truly horrified. And the gentleman who was conducting the meeting truly stopped, because it was very clear he did not have 2/3 of a vote. And after the 3rd vote, he still did not have 2/3 of a vote. So process-wise, I am just stunned. But Dave brings up another good point. Even in the New Mexico legislature and in Congress, each day is opened with prayer. You are free to participate or to not participate. And where I see the chinks in our armor with regard to our freedom of religion is, when do we start cutting the chaplains from our military? You see, to me, this is bedrock for our nation. And Dave, the best way that I can answer your question is by my actions. And so I will not stand for removing prayer to begin the day. We need all the help we can get in Congress. And the same thing is true with our members of the military.
243-3333. Byron, you're next on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, Byron.
Hi, Janice. I was at the LULAC debate, and Michelle, there were about 20 questions, and it looked like over 75% of them, her answers spent lots and lots of money. But it was never discussed how much she was spending. But I would like to know how you address both the problems of her wanting to spend enormous amounts of money on almost everything, and how you would do it differently so that we could go forward and take care of our problems without spending just unbelievable amounts of money.
All right. Thanks, Byron.
Well, a great question. At the LULAC debate, we were talking about health care, and my opponent said 2 things. One is that we're going to bring in a lot of money into the state because of the Affordable Care Act, and the numbers are a little bit sketchy. That money is not going to go into the consumer's pockets. It's a direct expenditure. And the other thing is that she said, well, the government needs to invest. The government needs to invest in business. And as I was sitting there making notes, I just couldn't figure out where the money was coming from. And so my approach, Byron, is just very different, is that when we are going to embark on a program, I'm going to do that cost-benefit analysis. I need to know, do we have enough money coming in to pay for this? And, I like budgeting. I know that you've got to project a little bit, but you also have to also recognize what the downside is so you've got enough money to accomplish the promise.
243-3333. Mike, you're next on 770 KKOB. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Janice, this is actually one of your volunteers. I'm the guy building your sign.
Oh, Mike, thank you.
Yeah, but I have a question. Assuming we get Romney in office and Republican House and Senate, where do you see our economy a year from now?
And, a year from now, I think you will start seeing it on an uptick. Mike, we are deep in debt. And so fixing this is going to take some time. But some of the simple things that we can do and that I hope to accomplish is to, if we can't completely repeal Dodd-Frank, at least to open it up. One of the problems that we're having with our economy is in our housing industry. Dodd-Frank, which is the bill that was supposed to protect us from all those awful people on Wall Street, and it did to a certain extent. But at the same time, it literally shanghaied the appraisal industry. And so now, if you need a loan to buy a house, even one that's on a short sale for foreclosure, if you have to borrow money, chances are that sale is dead. That was an unintended consequence. And when you stop that type of economic activity, the entire economy grinds to a halt.
243-3333. We'll take a break and we'll come back, take more of your phone calls for Janice Arnold-Jones here on 770 KKOB.